Hello and welcome to Infinity Unbound and our Get to Secure series. This particular session is about protecting your most important asset, which is we believe is your data. My name is Ian Stretton and I am a pre-sales architect here at Infinity Group. And we've got Tristan with us.
Thanks, Ian. I'm Tristan Shortland, Chief Innovation Officer at Infinity Group.
So in this session, we're going to talk a bit about what we believe is your greatest asset for a business, which is data and data within your systems that you've got. So your ERP, your finance systems, your CRM systems, and how to protect the data that is in those systems. But also things like multi-factor authentication. What is that? How could that assist? And centralising some of the security around single identities.
Thanks, Ian. So I think it's probably worth talking a bit at the start about what we mean when we say ERP and CRM systems and other kind of operational systems. So ERP is kind of finance, manufacturing, operations, all of those kind of functions. So generating a lot of data, as you can imagine. CRM being customer relationship management, so sales, customer service, marketing, those kind of things. But depending on the industry that you're in, there'll be lots of other important systems within the organisation as well. So things like project management or internal ticketing or a multitude of systems, and they'll all have separate, potentially, data sets.
Generally siloed.
Data sets particularly in the SMB world as well, right? So quite often these companies are choosing systems as they grow, and they're growing quickly, and often those choices are around what's cheapest, what's quickest, what's easiest to spin up. Can I go and get a free trial and then run with it? So those conversations don't often involve the security angle. So we can end up with systems that have lots of separate logins, don't have multi-factor authentication, don't necessarily know where they're storing data or where they're processing data. So some examples out there, particularly with some of the AI processing that's happening now, where you think you know where your data is, but it's going off somewhere else to be processed. So this kind of ecosystem of systems grows organically, but sometimes a bit out of control. So there's no centralized kind of security thought and identity approach and those kind of things. So very quickly you can get to a point where you've got lots of different systems with lots of different types of security that you've then got to try and manage and bring together into a kind of coherent security strategy. So
I suppose if we get to some of the basics just to start off with, if we think about how a journey for an end user to actually get to the data in the first place, what steps they think they need to go through and actually what they do go through. So starting off with sort of the devices and the user in the first place, their identity, what they're signing in with. Again, as you touched on there, maybe there's a lot of organizations out there that have got different identities, they're signing in with different profiles, aren't they, at the moment? And this is where you end up with using the same password across multiple systems, isn't it? Or writing them down and that kind of thing. That's the sticky note on the corner of the screen. That's a side effect of having to log into 10 different systems in 10 different ways. So what could we do with, as there are technologies out there, of course, to help to fix that, Microsoft being one of them. What would we recommend there, do you think? I guess anything that you can integrate into a single sign-on solution is going to help, right? So if we can create one way of accessing those systems, and again, going back to where they've come from, that's not always that straightforward. If you've got a mixture of on-premise and cloud, you're going to have to think about what does the path to get into a single sign-on solution look like, because that's might involve changing systems, or it might involve integrating those existing systems with Entra or something like that. Yep. So of course we've got Entra or Entra ID, which we can use, which is clearly part of Office 365 or the Microsoft 365 suite, but it's also a service that you could take, on its own as well to help provide a single identity. So we've got, for argument's sake, let's say we've got that in place, which is great, and we can therefore implement things like strong authentication methods as well. So one of those is multi-factor authentication, isn't it? So what we mean by multi-factor authentication is it's not just a user putting their username and their password in, it's providing another or an alternative method of authentication, isn't it? So some examples of that could be facial recognition. Well, there's many of the biometric ones, isn't there? You can have extra pins and that kind of thing. I think with all of those, again, you've got to think about the kind of user base in that. So they've got used to having lots of systems, maybe with simple logins. You need to think about if you're going to ask them for a strong password that they've got to change regularly, plus an additional authentication step in there, just make sure they're ready for that, because there's the
change management angle to all of that, isn't there?
Yep. And there's also, you can do it with apps. I think most of us these days, with certainly modern banking, you kind of get little devices that you can sign in with, or an app on your phone that sends you a code for a particular point in time. So we can do all of that again with the Microsoft solution. And once we've got authenticated from that perspective, then it's also what we can do, of course, with our systems, if it was a corporate system, is look at the endpoint that they're coming from as well. So we can kind of look at, are they coming from a trusted device or an untrusted device? Is that, if it was an untrusted device, does it meet certain capability criteria, antivirus criteria? Is it got a certain security level in its operating system as well? So we can kind of look at all of that as we then allow it even just to enter into any of our systems to start off with, can't we?
Yeah, things like encryption are really important as well when we're talking data, aren't they?
So once we're let's assume that we've got through that and we've got sort of access to data. What kind of things can we do or to protect the data once it's been accessed itself?
Yeah, so then we get down to kind of system level security, I guess, don't we? So particularly finance data, CRM data as well. You've got lots of customer data in there. That's all sensitive information, and we want to make sure only the right people can access the right areas within a system. So that's often down to the system itself. Can we configure security roles? Can we make sure people can only access what they should be able to access and only do what they should be able to do as well? So being able to delete stuff when you shouldn't be able to is a kind of obvious example, but there's lots of other examples like that. So when we're thinking about the user, we're trying to protect them by making sure that they can only do things that they're allowed to do. And again, the more we can consolidate systems onto a single platform, the simpler that becomes. So if we think about the Microsoft Business Applications stack,
yep,
you can have a single set of roles and permissions. They can be integrated with Microsoft 365, so we can assign what people can do based on their role. So we're only having to kind of configure that once. And we've then got a kind of common set of permissions across those systems. If we've got a separate finance system and a separate CRM system and a separate project management tool and so on, then that job becomes multiples harder every time, because you've got to set up that structure in each of those systems, maintain it in all of those systems, and as part of onboarding, for example, make sure that you're setting up permissions correctly across all of those. So it becomes a big job. Yeah,
and coming back to actually protecting data as they're accessing it, but actually I think that's a good segue, I suppose, into disaster recovery as well. Like you just touched on, if we've got multiple systems that have kind of been almost set up in silo and they're running on different platforms, potentially different identities as we're talking about there, is if there were any issues, maybe even across the whole estate, but even if it was just with those individual platforms, that can really affect business, can't it? I mean, obviously having disaster recovery plans is quite a key business requirement, but if you've got to have 3, 4, 5 potentially different disaster recovery plans for different systems to be able to get back on, that can really be costly, can't it?
Yeah, and there's a maintenance overhead of that as well, right? It's not, you can't just have a plan, you've got to test that plan, make sure it still works, make sure it's suitable. I think about how much downtime can you take for that particular system, and quite often in that world as well, where it's grown organically and there's multiple systems at play, there's lots of integration points in there as well. Now they might be kind of semi-automated, fully automated, a bit human, but when you think about, well, if that system goes down, how many others is it going to take out with it as part of that disaster recovery plan as well? So it's not just, right, we can restore the data in system X. What impact has that had whilst it's been down on those other systems? If we missed transactions that have come from online and should have gone into our finance system, those kind of questions. So when you're thinking about disaster recovery and business continuity, you've got to look at the whole estate, and the more apps you got in there, the harder that is.
The harder it is, absolutely. So clearly there's things we can do there, like I say, with providing those on a single platform. But I guess bouncing back to where we were maybe going just before we went into that segue around data protection itself. So we can do quite a lot of things now, can't we, with as the users are accessing those systems, emails, CRM systems, we can protect the data that's within those services and as they're accessing them, and also do a lot of what we call adaptive access as well. So, should a user, to your point before, if they can delete something, we can interrogate that. Should they be deleting it, or can they modify the records? And then we can Also change that based on maybe not the user, but maybe the device that they're coming from as well. So things like if they're coming from an untrusted device, maybe they're not allowed to download the data locally. They can only read-only access from an untrusted device. But if they were accessing that from a corporate device, we can allow sort of full control. So that kind of theory of adaptive access kind of goes across most of the ecosystem, doesn't it, in the Microsoft?
Yeah, and I guess you've got some good kind of logging and alerting to back that up as well. So you can see when someone's exported all your sales data or whatever, you're going to want to know about that. Like you say, you can control who can do that and from where, but for some people that's going to be a necessity, but you still want to know that that's happened. So that kind of auditing behind it is as important as being able to control it in the first place, I think.
So I suppose with that, I mean, we're saying this, clearly we can, here at the Infinity Group, we can clearly help you with that as an organisation with our services that we offer. But just in terms of, if you weren't on a completely Microsoft-centric sort of platform, because there are other products out there, of course, what services could we do? Are the things that we can, even if that data is stored on a service that's outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, can we still protect that data and those business critical systems?
Yes, I think it's a design thing, isn't it? So you need to understand what you've got, where it is. Is it in the cloud? Is it on premise? And then think about, as we said earlier, who needs access to what and how are you going to control that? And then it's about using the tools within the Microsoft stack.
So we've got things like Defender for Cloud App. I mean, the Defender suite, actually, the Microsoft Defender suite is I think is one of the best out there at the moment anyway. But one in particular is that sort of Defender for Cloud Apps is, I don't think it gets talked, well, in my world, it doesn't, I don't think get talked about quite enough. But in terms of what that can do with that integration with third-party systems is as good as, those systems being run on that Microsoft platform anyway. Being able to audit, to track, to even protect the data as well and do this adaptive access while it's in flow as well. I think it's one of those services that is really good. And the way it does that is almost acting like a proxy. So essentially your users are coming through and kind of into your environment, if you like, and then it's using that Defender for Cloud Apps as the proxy to then access those third-party systems that might be hosted on the internet or on cloud-hosted other systems. It's kind of using that as a proxy to get through, and that's how we can control and do that adaptive access. If it's not coming through that, then there is still clearly some control we can do with Entra as well. To control some of that access too. So let's have an example where that customer or that we've got an organisation out there. They're in a bit of a mess, as in they have got those systems all over the place. They've got different identities. They've got maybe databases that have got separate logins. What kind of things would we suggest, and how would we maybe help them to move to that next stage?
Yeah, so it's difficult, right? So you've got this set of systems that's growing organically. You've got people that are flat out busy in these organisations doing their day jobs. So for us, it's about taking some time out for that to allow us to kind of go through a proper process and thinking about the strategy first. So you've got to understand where the organisation's at now, where they want to get to, what that looks like in terms of the market that they're in, what the strategy. Acquisitive, they want to buy companies, do they want to be sold? All of these things make a difference in terms of design and that kind of thing. So we start with the big pictures to really understand where they're at and where they're going to. Then we'll look at some strategies around how we're going to get there. So that involves talking to different departments, understanding what systems they've got, what systems they maybe are going to need in the future. Are there any in-flight projects at the moment to consolidate systems? What kind of internal skills have they got? And it's only really once you understand that kind of full landscape, you can then start thinking about the technical end of the solution, right? So then once you understand what the goal is and what the aims are, you can then think about what tools we could employ, what a roadmap looks like. Are there any kind of interim states before we get to our kind of desired target architecture? And then start thinking about where we can fit in some tools and techniques to facilitate that roadmap, I suppose.
I suppose just on that point, I've been in this industry for more years than I care to remember, as you can probably tell by the grey hairs. But in terms of when I've spoken to lots of different customers through lots of different sectors and different size organizations as well. I think there's still, out there this theory or a feeling of the IT is something that gets done to an organization, where it really isn't that case, right? It's IT is there to support and help, and there to help an organization drive forward with whatever it is they want to do. But I do still feel that there's maybe some owners of businesses, directors of businesses that still see IT as just a cost center rather than actually it can help us to elevate and progress on, right? So I think having that strategy, having that clear thought process as to, okay, this is what the business is trying to achieve. Now, what systems, what bedrock do we need underneath that from an IT system perspective, and security, etc., is again going to be key to some of that, and we'll talk about maybe some of that in some of our other sessions that we've got coming up as well, around the different threats that you might see in everyday life. But it really is key to an organisation to really thinking about getting IT to do what it needs it to do, rather than the other way around.
As an enabler.
As an enabler rather than a disabler, or like I say, as a cost centre. So yeah, that's really good in terms of next steps then. So we've talked about, having a clear IT strategy. That's clearly something we can help you with. We would love to help you, so give us a call. we can talk you through. In terms of other next steps, is there any other things that an organisation can think of, accreditations, compliancy sort of things that they can start to have a look at as well?
Yeah, I guess, there's a few different ones out there, aren't there? And again, they're not necessarily just costs. They're things that are going to help you win more business, going to help you look more credible in your market and those kind of things. So worthwhile investments, again, part of a kind of strategic roadmap, so you know where you're going to spend that money and why you're going to spend it. But yeah, those are all going to add value to the organisation, and doing those things proactively is going to make a big difference as well. Lots of the time we see security become important after something bad has happened.
Yeah, it's always too late.
You need to get in there first, get secure, get a good foundation in, and then you can run other transformative projects in the comfort that you've got your, like you say, your bedrock sorted out and your foundations laid.
So when it comes to thinking about the IT strategy, like we just touched on as well, and cost centers, but also in terms of the data itself, I think there's a lot of organizations that maybe don't realize the benefit. Like you say, you've got data, lots of data, generally, in different systems, but actually some of that data is a commodity, is valuable. It's knowledge about your customers and your suppliers, and that can be used as not just a cost center, of course, to maintain it, but also as a way of potentially helping the organizations move forward as well, and get a leading edge on other people in the same sector as well.
Yeah, it's full of insight, that data. Depending on the industry and things, that's going to be different. But like you say, the ability to monetize that and use that for making proactive decisions, or assessing different product and service lines or different markets, all of that is becoming much easier now. We're going to talk about AI later, but there's a lot of applications there as well. So treating that data as if it's an important thing and an asset, that's critical, and that's where the security angle comes in. You can only benefit from it and monetize it if you know where it is. You can access it securely, and in a coherent manner. So if you've got lots of different systems, how do you bring that data together? What's the kind of strategy around having a data warehouse or a data lake and those kind of things, and how do we secure the data that's then in there? Once all that's in place, you can then start to really benefit from it and drive insights and action from that data. Cool,
great stuff. So I think that maybe brings us to the end of this particular session, but as we just touched on, there's other sessions that we'll be going to be releasing as well, so please do look out for those. We've got things around AI, artificial intelligence, which I'd urge you to take a look at, as well as threats, cybersecurity threats, what to think about and what they are. So please do look out for those.